Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned. For my weekly reading report, it's time for my weekly reading report, that fantastic program where I talk about all the stuff that I read during the previous week, or previous 2 weeks in this case. I've been gone for a week. I think it's been about a week since I made a video, maybe longer, I can't remember. Because last week my work schedule changed temporarily and I had to do all kinds of different stuff and my hours were weird and I've been a little bit under the weather. So yeah, I didn't manage to make any videos, but we've returned now, Roger, to talk about the stuff that we've been reading the last couple weeks. I did manage to read some stuff. So let's talk about that stuff that I read. I will break out my list for the 500 book challenge, the challenge where I have to read 500 books that I own before I'll buy any new ones. This just keeps rolling right along, this challenge. The last book I talked about was book 335, which was The Amazing Spider-Man Epic Collection, Volume 2, Great Responsibility, which was excellent. And if I am remembering right, I had just started to read book 336, which was A Study in Scarlet by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the very first Sherlock Holmes book, A Study in Scarlet. And it was at the end of towards the end of January that I started that. And usually when I read Sherlock Holmes, I've read the complete Sherlock Holmes about 3 times, I think. And I've always I've just started at the beginning and gone to the end. I've read it all in one big chunk. But this time I thought I would read it just a book at a time here and there because I've got so much other stuff to read. And this month, February, there's a reading event called Holmes is Where the Heart Is, which was created by, I think it was created by the Great Booktube channel, Mystery and Mayhem, who I'll link down below. So I thought, Sherlock Holmes event, it's probably a good time to get back into Sherlock Holmes because it's been a while. So I reread A Study in Scarlet, the very first Sherlock Holmes story, the story where Watson and Sherlock Holmes first meet. Watson is back from the war and he's been injured. In this story, he was injured in the shoulder, although later that becomes doubtful because he might have been also injured in the leg. Who knows? His injuries are kind of a mystery. But at this point, he was injured in the shoulder, I think. And he's had to go back to civilian life. And he's kind of aimless in London because he doesn't really know what to do with himself. He doesn't have a ton of money. And he figures he does need to get somebody to go halves with him on some rooms. And he happens to meet a friend of his, Stanford, who provides a great service for Sherlock Holmes and Watson in introducing them to each other, and then disappears from the series. I think his name was Stanford, if I'm remembering right. Anyway, he introduces Sherlock Holmes and Watson, and they decide, yeah, let's get some rooms together. So they go to 221 Baker Street and start living together. But when they first start living together, Watson doesn't know what Sherlock Holmes does for a living. And for some reason, he just doesn't ask. He feels like, if he wanted to tell me, he would tell me. But he realizes sometimes, kind of weird people show up and they want to talk to Sherlock Holmes. They want to consult with him. And so he doesn't really know. But one day, Sherlock Holmes tells him basically what he does for a living. And he starts taking Watson along with him. And immediately after Watson learns what Sherlock Holmes does, there is a murder. There's a mysterious murder that Sherlock Holmes is called upon to investigate for the police. And that is actually a pretty good mystery. It's a pretty good mystery, the first half of this story. This is interesting, A Study in Scarlet, because it's basically 2 different stories mashed up into one. The first half is basically the murder mystery. And the second half is basically a Western, actually. It takes place in the United States and Utah. which tells the story of the actual, well, it tells the backstory of the murderer. It tells the murderer's backstory, basically. A story full of tragedy in the United States. And so that's like the second half of the book, which has an entirely different feel from the other half. And I've heard that that's one of the things that some readers of Sherlock Holmes don't particularly care for. But it's something that actually Sir Arthur Conan Doyle did a lot in his stories. He would, drop the Sherlock Holmes story for a bit and go into the backstory of what led up to the crime. And he does that in the very first Sherlock Holmes story. And it's pretty good. The whole thing is really entertaining and fast moving. And I won't give any spoilers away in case you've never read the story, because it's a good one. I really enjoyed it. Not, like I said, it's not the best Sherlock Holmes story, but it's a really good Sherlock Holmes story and an excellent beginning, and of great interest just because, this is the story where Sherlock Holmes and Watson meet each other and first get to know each other. And that's kind of cool in itself. So I read this in January, at the end of January, and I'll probably follow that up with, I'll definitely follow that up with the second Sherlock Holmes story, which is The Sign of Four. So I'll read that soon. So that was book 336. And then I realized that I was running out of January. I was on the last day of January, I think, last couple days maybe. And I realized I had not celebrated Ambiwary. Grammaticus, the great Grammaticus, had created a reading event called Ambiwary, where in January you have to read Roger Zelazny at some point. And I actually have the last book in the Amber Chronicles to read. But I'm kind of putting that off because once I read it, it's done. No more Amber Chronicles. But I had to read something Roger Zelazny, and I happened to have this book lying around, recently sent to me by the great international man of mystery, in a big box of books, which is fantastic. So I thought, I've never heard of this book. This is Doorways in the Sand by Roger Zelazny. And I'd never heard of it, didn't know anything about it. It has a very mysterious cover. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to read this for Ambiwary. So I read this starting it basically the last couple days of January. So I barely squeaked into Ambiwary. And this is the story of Fred Cassidy. In the near future, in a society where human beings have had contact with aliens and they're flying cars and stuff, because, it's the future, we have Fred Cassidy, who is a perpetual student. He's been a student for 15 years in college. He refuses to graduate because he's getting kind of an allowance from his uncle, who is cryogenically frozen. It's a weird story. He's getting an allowance from his rich uncle, but only for as long as he's in college. Once he's out of college, he has to make it on his own. So he's decided he's just never going to graduate. He's just going to stay in college as long as possible. And he manages to do that. He manages to be a full-time student in college for 15 years, switching his majors every time he needs to, taking every class in the college, doing whatever he has to do to stay in the college. And also, he's really into climbing stuff. He likes to climb buildings. And so at night, he'll go out and he'll climb buildings. This is the other thing that he does. So he's like one of those parkour guys, Roger. He's one of those dudes. So he's a little strange, this fella. And unfortunately for him, he gets involved in essentially an interplanetary caper, in that there's this mysterious stone. There's a mysterious stone that has been stolen. And he was one of the last guys that saw this stone. And so there are a lot of spy types who think he has it. So he runs afoul of criminals, and there's this whole mystery of, where this space rock went and what it is. And also he's being contacted psychically from somewhere. He's getting kind of like psychic messages that'll give him information. He's meeting aliens who take the form of animals. So you've got talking wombats and donkeys. And it's a lot of fun, this book. It's fast moving. There's a lot of stuff going on in this book. And it's just fun. This is just a fun book. Solid science fiction. It occasionally reads like fantasy just because it's so weird, but it is pretty much strictly a science fiction novel, and it's great. It's really good. I was surprised that I had never heard about this at all. But solid Roger Zelazny. This is a solid Roger Zelazny book. Not his best book, of course, but a really good one, and apparently it's one that he thought a lot of, from what I've read. So, Doorways in the Sand. I recommend this book if you ever find it. It's a ton of fun. So, that was book 337, which brings us to book 338, which was Planet of Exile by Ursula K. Le Guin. So, I'm doing a kind of Ursula K. Le Guin Hainish Cycle read-along, which was created by Book Songs and Other Magic. Every month we read a book in the Hainish Cycle in the order that they were first published. And this is the first printing of Planet of Exile, the second in the Hainish Cycle, by Ursula K. Le Guin. It was an ace double. You flip it over, it's a different book. And so I read this one, Planet of Exile by Ursula K. Le Guin, and it was fantastic. This is really, really good. Rocannon's World was the first book that we read last month. Rocannon's World actually might be, plot-wise, a better book. Maybe. This one was just so well written, though. The plot in this is pretty... I would not say it's unoriginal, but it's, you know, there's a lot of stuff we've seen before. This is a story about these humans who have been exiled for 600 years on a planet that has very strange seasons, like winter. Every season lasts like 15 years. And winter is coming at this point in the book. Winter is coming. So we have basically a city of exiled human beings on this planet, and there are natives on this planet, but they're also human beings who also at one time colonized this world. Only they have been here for thousands of years. So the guys that have been here for 600 years are basically the newcomers. And the old-timey natives view these newcomers with suspicion. Not just because they look kind of different, because the humans who have been on this planet for, you know, thousands of years, they're all very pale and blonde, and the newcomers are black. Also, the newcomers, the guys who have been here for only 600 years or so, they came with advanced technology, and even though they try not to use that technology because there's a rule where you have to try to live at the same cultural level as the people who live there already. So there's anthropological stuff going on in this book because it's Ursula K. Le Guin. But they're regarded as kind of sorcerers, and it's believed they have magic and all kinds of stuff. And so they're regarded with a bit of suspicion. And in this story, it's kind of a love story. One of the leaders of our 600 exiles falls in love with a young native girl. And at the same time as this is happening, there is a massive horde of barbarians that are coming that will engulf the local native population and our exiles. And so they have to try to work together to fend off this great barbarian horde, which isn't so successful. a lot of stuff is packed into this little book. It's only like 110 pages, I think, in this Ace Double. How long was it? It was short. It was 113 pages in the Ace Double. So it's a wee little book, but it's fantastic. I mean, just so well written. The characters are great. Like I said, the plot might not be the most original thing in the world, but it's handled very, very well. I actually think, as far as a reading experience, it was probably even better than Rocannon's World, because I think it was frankly better written. It holds together really, really well and flows, I think, better perhaps than the first book, although Rocannon's World is pretty great too. It was just great. I highly recommend it. Planet of Exile by Ursula K. Le Guin, who I suspect, after this year is up and I've read a bunch of her books, I suspect she's going to rank as one of my favorite writers, because she's just great. These first two books have been fantastic. So Rocannon's World, awesome cover on this Ace Double. Excellent. But you flip it over and there's another book, which of course I had to read as well. This is Mankind Under the Leash by Thomas M. Dish, with pointy-haired dude with his axe there. So early in the 500 book challenge, it was decided that Ace Doubles, even though they're two books, would only count as one book. This was a rash decision, Roger, and foolish. But, you know, it's precedent now. Ace Doubles count as one book in the challenge. And so Mankind Under the Leash didn't really count for the 500 book challenge. But I had to read it because it was the other side of the Ace Double, and I had to find out what it was. So I read Mankind Under the Leash by Thomas M. Dish. And it wasn't bad. It just really wasn't my kind of book, I think. It was kind of a humorous, you know, allegory kind of thing. It's a story about mankind in the future when they have been dominated by a mysterious alien life form. And they've been turned into pets, basically. Human beings have been turned into pets. And to really ram it home, Thomas M. Dish decides to give all the humans dog names. You know, our main character's name is White Fang. And, you know, there are other characters and they all have dog names. And the cities that they live in are called kennels. And they're all, you know, the main character and most of the characters are perfectly happy at the start of this book being pets. It's, and the whole book, you know, it's kind of like that, where it has this kind of very on the nose humor, and it just wasn't my kind of thing. I think this book just wasn't my thing. Not badly written, you know. I think on Goodreads I had to give this 3 stars because it's not a bad book. It's just not my kind of book. And I really wished I could just turn it back over and read this again, because this was awesome. So, yeah, I read these in this Ace Double, and together they made book 338. But that wasn't all I read, so I also read The Drowning Pool by Ross Macdonald, which is the second in the Lou Archer Detective series by Ross Macdonald. And I've decided, you know, I'm going to read all of these books. I've read a lot of them before. I've never read all of them. But I read a lot of these, I think, when I was in my 20s. And so this is the second one, The Drowning Pool. Like the first book, it was turned into a film starring Paul Newman, but I've never seen the movie. The book was pretty good. The first book was The Moving Target, which was also pretty good. This one might just be a bit better, actually. It might be a bit better. And it's moving into territory that Ross Macdonald continued with in his novels, which is basically a family tragedy or a family drama with characters in very dramatic, tragic situations. And the mystery is usually a murder, although sometimes it's a disappearance, you know. And Lou Archer is the outsider who is brought in, who has to figure out all the people he meets and try to figure out what's going on and solve the mystery. And in this case, it is a woman who's being blackmailed. So she's well off, but only because she married into money. And she's got an overbearing stepmother. And somebody is sending her blackmail notes, or she was sent a blackmail note, threatening to reveal an indiscretion from earlier in her life, and she's afraid that her husband, who's a real ass, will divorce her, and so she comes to Lou Archer for help. And in the course of the investigation, the mother-in-law is murdered in a pool. She's found floating dead in a pool, and there are multiple people who could have benefited from this woman's death. Did this woman die accidentally, or was she murdered? That's part of the mystery. It looks like she was probably murdered. And there are a couple mysteries going on in this book, The Drowning Pool, which I will not spoil, but it's an excellent book. Not his best. He actually got quite a bit better within the next couple books, from what I remember. But this was pretty darn good. I've been pretty happy with the first two books in this series. Lou Archer is just a really good character. As the books start, they're kind of Raymond Chandler pastiches. You know, they feel very much like Philip Marlowe books, especially the first one. Although really starting a little bit with this one and definitely going on in the next few books, Lou Archer gets his own personality. And the books take on a specific focus that kind of moves away from the Raymond Chandler, Philip Marlowe books. And they become their own thing. It's awesome. So this was a good book. That was book 339, The Drowning Pool. That's the last book that I finished. And right now, what am I reading right now? Jack London started Son of the Wolf, which was Jack London's first collection of short stories. I've decided, I'm going to read a bunch of Jack London, and I'll probably start at the beginning, which Roger helpfully made the first book in Roger's Cheap Old Book Club. So the first book in Roger's Cheap Old Book Club is Son of the Wolf. Jack London, fantastic writer, just so good. He's just so good. A classic writer who a lot of people apparently don't read anymore, which is just shocking to me. He should be. Jack London is fantastic. And I mean, just such a great writer. And so Son of the Wolf is a collection of his Klondike stories based on his own personal experiences as he went hunting for gold in the Klondike. Didn't find any gold, but he got a lot of good stories up there. He heard a lot of stories from the people in the area and his fellow seekers of gold. And he came back with just a wealth of stories. And the first few stories in the collection, I've read the first 3. All of them are great. They're all great. And I'll talk more about that collection next week. So again, the first in Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, the cheapest book club around. All of the books in Roger's Cheap Old Book Club are available for free at Project Gutenberg and other places. Standard ebooks, for example. And this first book is excellent. Son of the Wolf. So started reading that, which will be book 340 once I finish it. But I've read some other stuff. What other stuff have I read? I've read some comic book stuff. I've probably read too much comic book stuff to actually talk about. So I'll talk about the main stuff. Amazing Spider-Man. I am reading every issue of The Amazing Spider-Man from the first run of The Amazing Spider-Man. And the last regular issue I read was number 43, which was the Rhino. So the Rhino is showing up, causing trouble. And John Romita has taken over the art from Steve Ditko. And actually, in his first couple stories, Stanley asked John Romita if he could draw kind of like Steve Ditko. And he kind of did. But at this point, he's starting to draw like himself. And so he's great. He's great on Spider-Man. Probably the most influential Spider-Man artist of all. And he just does great stuff. I just finished the annual that had the cover put on the cover of this Epic collection. This annual where Spider-Man is asked to join the Avengers. There's Thor there. He's asked to join the Avengers, but he has to pass a test. He has to bring the Hulk to the Avengers. Yeah, just bring us the Hulk. That's no big deal. Just bring us the Hulk. If you pass that test, then you could be an Avenger. But Spider-Man could have passed the test, but he felt bad for the Hulk, and he really didn't know what the Avengers wanted the Hulk for. He's like, what are they going to do to the Hulk? Poor dude. So he's like, nah, maybe not. Maybe I'll just continue to work alone. Of course, years and years later, he did join the Avengers because every superhero eventually joined the Avengers. Like, literally, I think every superhero. So I haven't got as far in this as I've wanted to just because I've been reading so much other stuff, including Superman. I've been reading a lot of Superman. I'm working my way through the Dan Jurgens Superman Action Comics Omnibus. This takes place after New 52, at the beginning of the Rebirth era, where he's running around in his pants without trunks on the outside, which is just silly. It's just a silly look for Superman. The past several issues, Superman and Wonder Woman have been fighting Doomsday. Doomsday has returned, and Superman and Wonder Woman are fighting Doomsday. That's all that's happened for issue on issue. For several issues, it's just this ongoing battle with Doomsday. It's a good fight, but, you know, it is finally over. It's finally over. They finally defeated Doomsday. So that's all that's been going on in this. It's pretty good. There's Wonder Woman there. The art is decent. It's pretty good at this point in Action Comics. But really, I don't have much to say about it because they've only been fighting Doomsday. But I'm also reading a bunch of other comics. Most notably, since I am reading Superman every day, I'm reading these old Superman comics from the late 80s and early 90s. This is Superman issue 42 of the series that was restarted in 1986. And Superman, at this point, has become the Krypton Man. He's been transformed by a Kryptonian artifact to become more like a native Kryptonian. And since this is John Byrne's version of Superman, native Kryptonians were all dicks. So basically, Superman has become a selfish dick because in this era of Superman, that's what Kryptonians were. They were just a bunch of selfish asses. And Superman has become, because of the Eradicator, this Kryptonian artifact, he has become a dick, just like the rest of the Kryptonians. Will he stay an asshole, or will he become cool Superman once again? Well, I suspect he will return to coolness. But at this point, no, still a dick. So I've been reading that. That's been fun. And I've been reading a bunch of other comic book stuff as well. Werewolf by Night, all kinds of stuff, which I'll talk about later. I'll probably have to do a whole comic book video talking about that stuff, because I've already gone on long enough. I will try to be back soon. I actually will probably be back tomorrow. I'll definitely be back tomorrow. I don't have to work tomorrow, so I'll be back tomorrow. You'll want to watch this. You don't want to watch that silly Super Bowl thing. Well, who wants to watch that when you could watch this channel? I will catch you next time.